calls for President Biden to step down are growing this morning, raising questions about what would happen to Biden's war chest if he's no longer on the ticket. Fox Business's Madison Allworth with more on this story. It's all about the money, Madison.
It is, Maria, and that list of calling on Biden to drop out, it keeps growing. George Clooney is now calling on the president to take a bow just a month after the actor hosted a star-studded fundraiser for the president that raked in $28 million alone. According to President Biden's re-election campaign and the Democrat National Committee, the president raised over $260 million in the second quarter of 2024, with over $240 cash on hand. Now, the fate of that financial arsenal would depend on who replaces him at the top of the ticket. If Kamala Harris moved up to the top of the ticket into that president spot, she would be able to inherit most, if not all, of the money because her name is already on that ticket. Now, if it's completely replaced, it is a little trickier. The money could not just be transferred over to another campaign. I spoke to former general counsel for the Federal Election Commission, Ken Gross, and he said there are a couple of options. One is that it could be given to the DNC, or that campaign money could be converted into a political action committee, but PACs can only make a maximum donation to a campaign of $3,300. Finally, the funds could be transferred to a super PAC, which would not be able to coordinate directly with that new campaign. Now, you know, a lot of this money goes towards advertisements, and the money becomes less powerful in the hands of a super PAC because they have to pay more for advertisements compared to a campaign under FCC rules. People are talking about that money, how it could or would be best transferred, and who could make up for lost fundraising time.
Money is the mother's milk of politics, and they're not going to have a conversation about who the candidate is going to be without that entering the conversation. It may not be determinative, and if a multimillionaire is running like Pritzker or somebody else, that could also change the conversation. But money will be part of the conversation.
Of course, though, Maria, the president is adamant that he is staying in the race and he has no intention of leaving or leaving his fundraising dollars to anyone else. Maria?
All right, Madison, thanks very much. Madison Allworth, a Trump advisor, is telling Axios about his 2024 election plan, saying, quote, former President Trump is adjusting his agenda, the GOP platform, his vice presidential plans, even his debate style to win over more than half a dozen persuadable voter groups in 7 states. Your thoughts, Joe?
Look, I think this is putting into play what the campaign probably learned in 2020. 2020, the base just simply wasn't enough. We saw them change their public strategy, right? We have President Trump in the Bronx. We had him in Miami last week. We had him in other urban areas around the country going after different voter groups who were not that keen to vote for him in 2020. So I think you're seeing the president play the long game and the smart game and doing what he has to do to deliver more votes. We have to pretend that Joe Biden's not the nominee, and this is not going to be a walk in the park. And I think the only way to do that is to keep President Trump focused on winning more voters.
Well, you know, isn't it interesting? Go back to when Joe Biden first walked into the Oval Office and the administration, rather than calling it the Biden administration, called it the Biden-Harris administration. I'm wondering, was that all planned? Was that because of this very issue? So now Kamala has access to that money. It's all about the money. And, you know, she's got access to that money because her name is on the ticket. So I'm just wondering if, I mean, a lot of this could have been seen beforehand, Mahak.
Well, Maria, I have to agree with you. It was all with the Biden-Harris campaign ticket. And now
they saw the weakness issues in Biden way long ago, is I guess my point.
Well, and they used a token black, half Indian woman to help Biden secure that vote. But these Democrats are still holding on to the old white guy when they should be looking at Kamala Harris. Why are they having secret meetings? Because they're terrified that Kamala is going to step into that position and completely destroy their positions of power. And it's not just about the presidency today. It is down ticket. Look at Sherrod Brown, senator of Ohio, that will be replaced this November. Look at all the senators that are clawing now, trying to get out of Biden's way and out of those crosshairs, because it's truly about the economy. It's truly about illegal immigration. And regardless of Biden's decline, these are the Democrats that continue to rubber stamp this. And by the way, Kamala is part of this. She is the same Democrat that Joe Biden is.
Yeah,
same old thing.
Exactly. And it's the same policies, Mark. It's going to be the same. Whoever is there, whether it's Kamala at the top of the ticket or Joe Biden, it's the same exact policy.
torch will just be passed, right? I mean, it will be the same exact, the Democratic movement. It'll be the same exact thing, another 4 years of it, if they were to pull it off, which I think, is highly unlikely at this point, given what I've seen from the betting odds markets. But when you talk about, Trump kind of changing his style and stuff like that to win over, more of these, I don't know, maybe bubble groups, if you call them that. And you look at his performance in the debate compared to 4 years ago where he was highly interruptive. I thought he carried himself incredibly well. He was very professional. He wasn't throwing any haymakers, very calculated, methodical. And not to mention the fact, when you look at abortion, which killed the 2022 red wave that was supposed to happen,
Right.
his position on abortion is incredibly moderate.
Yeah, and it's all really important points to make as we watch what changes will be made. Earlier we were talking about Obama. I think Obama's been running the show from day one. Obama and his people have been around Biden. I mean, Susan Rice was there and then, remember, left when I think she was upset that Biden wanted to run again. So George Clooney apparently reached out to Obama before publishing that scathing op-ed.
To get his approval?
Yeah, to get his approval. That's what some are reporting this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Well, Obama has been running the show, and he's running that shadow campaign now for Harris because he knows he can control her. Remember, they're not voting for the president of the United States. They're voting for the Democrat apparatus that has continued to infiltrate our economy, our illegal immigration border, the threat in China. I mean, this is what the Democrats have done. They have full frontal assaulted us, and they're continuing to devastate us every single day. And we have to stop it. And it stops when we ensure that we have President Trump at the top of that
Obama
ticket.
said it when he was in office. He wants a fundamental change of this country.
I think Obama's been behind the scenes the whole time. This has been the weekend at Bernie's presidential campaign.
Yeah.
And now we're going to get the sequel, I bet, if Biden stays on the ticket.